Thank you for yours.
Yeah, and I haven't seen you since I met you first Friday.
Yeah.
And I remember that night, just you like taking the time out to explain like the meaning behind your platform, or not platform, but like your brand and why you do it and how you just capture like the moment. That was very, like, I remember I had to tell you, stop talking, like, let me buy the shirt, you know? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
No, I was, it was an interaction that I was really appreciative of.
Yeah.
When you and your friends came, it was V, right?
Viviana,
yeah. No, that was one of the highlights of that night for sure.
Yeah.
Anytime somebody comes by, because I have like a kind of a scripted like kind of spiel, that's really short, and kind of is the intention is to have the person I'm talking to, that be like the opener, you know, talking more.
right.
And you guys just from that opening, you know, clearly just understood what it was about. So that was really awesome for me.
Yeah.
So should I talk about?
Oh yeah, of course. Go ahead.
So Clens Prints is a brand that I started. I actually don't usually like to call it a brand. It's just more of an artistic expression through clothing and photography. But it's something I started when I got out of school, or was just finishing up school at ASU in 2016. And it was, I guess, the result of kind of a frustration with my career prospects coming out of school. Like, I studied business, which I find interesting. Clearly it's helped me with what I'm doing now, but a lot of the opportunities that I was being presented with, at least immediately, were more sales sides of things, which I'm talented at, but not something I really wanted to pursue for my life, or even long term. So I kind of went through a period of introspection at that time, probably 2 or 3 months. Really just sat down, and for a lot of it was just trying to figure out what it was that drove me. And I had picked up photography early on in college, but it was more of a casual pursuit, just when I had free time, which wasn't often. And I took photos that I was really proud of here and there, but it really started to become a focus of my life towards the end of college. And streetwear and fashion was something I had always been drawn to from like early adolescence, like middle school. So it kind of, during that period of introspection, I just was trying to think of ways to bring the two together. And there were some influences, like I know obviously tons of people print their graphic art onto shirts, and a lot of like painters will scan and make those into prints on shirts too. But I hadn't come across at that time anyone explicitly referring to these shirts or these pieces of clothing as wearable art.
Right.
And to me, that distinction was important, because what makes a piece of high fashion or luxury good valuable is a lot of times the designer behind it.
Yeah.
Right. So like Hedi Slimane was the one who really made Yves Saint Laurent, a big deal. It was his creative vision and the things he brought to life during his tenure there. And so things like that. And then there was an artist that I'm not particularly like a fan of, just because of how he conducts himself, or did conduct himself, back when I followed him. But there was this artist that I followed on Instagram in like 2013, 2014, I want to say, he was one of the individuals who would make, he would actually paint directly onto clothing, and then he would make what he called for public runs of it that would be printed. But he was the only person that I knew of who was calling his clothing art, not in the way that I necessarily do, like saying that it's a wearable
piece,
print,
yeah.
right? But he did always make it an emphasis that this is an original painting, right? And so that inspired it. Also, as you know, similar to if you were to get a print from a gallery, each one that I make, aside from the repurposed ones, which are printed on to vintage clothes, each of the premium ones that I make, much like from a gallery, they're numbered out of how many prints are made.
Mine was number 1 of 16. Yes, I remember.
Yeah. And so I think, one, that was to emphasize again that it was a piece of art.
Yeah.
But two, it was also to create a connection with I don't consider you guys customers, you're patrons, as I mentioned.
You said that. Yeah. Yes, you said that once I purchased. Yeah.
Yeah. So as a patron and somebody who's supporting my artwork, I want you to feel connected, or a form of intimacy, or a way that I'm making an effort to make you feel special.
Right.
And that's part of that. That's part of that aspect. Like I wanted to make sure that this is your print and nobody else's. Right. Even if somebody, one of 16 other people has it, that one that has your number.
Yeah. So. And I felt unique. I didn't care that there were 16 others. Just the fact that I was number 1, I was like, this is my number and this is my shirt. But I like that you have like you said, the whole spiel behind it, and kind of like what I said off mic. When you stood there and you were like, this is why I do what I do, I was like, I need a shirt. I need a shirt. I need a piece from him. Just so and then we went to a party, I don't know, a couple of days afterwards, and we kept telling everybody, this is what this guy does. Can you believe, this was taken overseas and he put it on the shirt because of this reason, and then that got them hey, who's that guy? And then, so the meaning behind it is, more attractive. It makes your work is already up to par enough, but the fact that you stood there and told a story and you're like, this is why I do what I do, it makes it 10 times more, yes, this is valuable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you hit it right on the head. The other part of it, I think that I don't know, drives me into this, or the other thing that I have in my mind whenever I'm putting together a design or printing a photo, is I want there to be a narrative. I want there to be a meaning. I want there to be something that can resonate deeper than this looks cool.
Right.
I don't think that that's really what drives people to buy things anymore. Mm-hmm. Whether it's something I'm not a fan of is the hype culture, right? But that's what people buy into. It's not this says something about you as a person. Right. And so if I'm not going to be a hype brand, which
you're not.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Then I have to have something deeper that's going to motivate somebody to say this is me, because you're decorating your body.
Right.
So
right.
it's
you as a creator. Why do you think the hype brand is much more appealing, or why are people so drawn to it?
There's more to it than two things, but I think there's two primary factors to it. One is that there's a sense of belonging that people reach for with it. And so when you buy a piece of when you buy a Supreme shirt, you in some way are now belonging to this influencer, these famous niche, people, right. These it's very much an aspirational thing where that's why I don't look down on people necessarily who buy Supreme. I just think that you could do better.
Yeah.
So especially not to go on not to digress too much, but
you can. I mean, it's up to you.
I mean, so Supreme's an interesting the reason I bring up Supreme is there's an especially interesting case, because something like Human Made or Bape or something like that is, I think, different to me, just because you could be buying it from the standpoint of Nigo's influence or Pharrell's influence, because Pharrell is behind brands like BBC and Ice Cream and Human Made, and that's he's an artist, right? But Supreme, to begin with, I think deserved some respect, just because it was a skate shop in LA, and they made their own shop brand, and they kind of created a whole culture on themselves, and that was cool, right? But at the end of the day, they were still just propagating really other people's designs and doing collaborations in that way to garner attention, and that's all fine and good. But then in recent years, they got bought by, for people who don't know, they got bought by Carlyle Group, which is which is the parent company for LVMH, so Louis Vuitton. And so now when you buy Supreme, you're not really buying into or supporting any sort of skate culture or anything like that, or even any independent artist community. Basically. It's you're buying into a very established corporate company, and I mean, in some ways, that's just supporting like the propagation of the same people who've taken money, for however long now, and so that's why I think it's ironic when a lot of the people who should be, I think, in support of like the creative culture end up wearing things like Supreme. But so part of it comes from the sense of belonging, but I think the other part of it comes from this want of status, right? And that's, I think that's a function of American, like one of the toxic parts of American culture, right? Is this idea that we can't be happy with what we have. We have to somehow convey to other people in the world that we're higher up in some way, that we're always in a very monetary sense, we're always improving, not necessarily in like a spiritual, mental, or emotional way, like,
which is where we should be improving. Right.
But the focus is on trying to show off a certain socioeconomic status, and what better or easier way to do that than buying a Supreme shirt, or a Louis Vuitton bag, or I mean, it could go on and on.
Exactly.
But so I think that those are the two biggest drivers of this hype culture, and I think if people just slowed down, really thought about where their money was going to, became conscious about the things that they have versus the things that they really need, and the things that actually resonate with them, then I think we'd have a much better economy and a much micro-focused economy where people are supporting other people like them. And so I don't know if that answered. I think that answered. It
did. You covered all the bases.
I know it kind of went off some.
No, go ahead. But I kind of want to go back to. So did you graduate from ASU?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you graduated and you realized I don't want to be in sales, did you feel defeated? Like, what did that make you? Were you already looking and planning on Clens? Like, were you already growing that? Like, what was your mindset between?
Well, what's ironic, I guess, is like I did actually end up going into sales.
Okay.
But that was just to make, I still, I have student loans, card payment. I mean, all the realities of day to day, right? And especially when you're, starting out, your art's really not going to support that. Yeah. So I did go into sales, but I went more of the like entry level, right, like retail sales realm, just because I didn't want a job. The idea for me was I didn't want a job that I had to take home. So like when I'd go to job fairs at ASU, these were jobs that like you were doing like more like B2B sales, and that's the sort of thing where, and it's not that those are bad opportunities. Like you can make a good, comfortable living at them. Some of these companies are, they take care of their employees. So I'm not trying to down that pursuit at all. Right. But it just really wasn't for me, because I knew in the back of my mind, I actually, as an aside or to give further context, I doubled with marketing and entrepreneurship. So I knew that at some point I wanted my own company. I wanted to forge my own path. So for me, it was important that I had a position that I would not have to take home. And so I went retail sales, something super casual. And then recently I'm at a digital marketing job right now. I'm looking to pivot into same with digital marketing, but like something that pays a bit better, hopefully, fingers crossed. But to going back to your question though, it was kind of, for a while, it was kind of a paralyzing thing, right? Because I had been sold on this idea that if I did well in school, I had job experience, I do X, Y, and Z right, that there's going to be this, this very like bright, good light at the end of the tunnel, right? Yeah. Like I thought like I'd get a job that, if not my dream job, something just underneath it. that would be happy with,
Right.
and would make me a good living, and it's just the reality was that that wasn't there.
Yeah.
And honestly, the other thing is like, every job that I've held since school, and part of this is by choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
But some of it's not. But every job I've held since school has been a job that you technically don't need a degree for.
Yeah.
And so what happened? This kind of, this loops back to what we're being sold on now is the it's the broken American dream.
Mm-hmm.
Is you go to school because your parents tell you.
Mm-hmm.
School is necessary.
Yeah.
You need to. That's how you're going to make a comfortable job. And then you get out and you realize, unless you went like a STEM route, or unless you made like really good connections while in school, in an industry that you really want to be in, you're competing against
thousands of
people
others.
the people who didn't get a degree and just went straight to the workforce, because now. Because you have this saturation of college graduates, and then you have now all of these kids who got jobs straight out of high school in a related field, employers, basically, they look at those as almost equivalent, right? Not all, but in a general sense. They look at those things as almost equivalent. If you got a degree in this field, and if you have 2 to 3 years experience in the field. So what ends up happening is you get into a bidding war for this job against somebody who doesn't have 30, 40K in student loans, which who's going to be the lowest bidder?
Right. Exactly.
So, and it just, that's kind of, and I think has a lot to do with why wages have stagnated in the last 30 years. But, I know this isn't like a political or socioeconomic podcast, but I think a lot of those messages kind of come through in my work. So and how could it not? We lived through the recession,
and we can't ignore these factors. It is what's happening, and part of why it's important to have these conversations is because it's uncomfortable. Like you said, because everyone's going in this same route, everyone's doing the same thing all the time, and it's okay, everyone's going to school, and then everyone's studying business, and then they get to a job and then they realize they hate it, and then they're 30 and they're depressed, but it's too late because they have kids, and then they have a mortgage, and it's just this infinite loop of just you get promised something and you get there, and then you're this is so empty, this is not what I wanted to do.
Well, and back to kind of the hype and status discussion, right? Because it's all linked. Is that how many people, you probably can think offhand, how many people do you know who they'll be the first person to say that they can't go get coffee with you because they don't have the money to do that, but their closet is full of
shoes,
Jordans,
they just
and
went shopping, whatever. They get the paycheck on Friday and then they're off
because the consumer, so that of course links back, you get into your your 30s, you realize I'm doing something that I really don't want, or even just indifferent about, you're, to me, and this was I think one of the biggest epiphanies I had when I was going through that introspection was I realized I not only don't want to do something that I don't like, it's that I would rather go broke doing something I love than be wealthy doing something I'm indifferent about. Because what is, life is temporary. And I'm not going to drive any sort of fulfillment from retiring at 65. I'd rather reach 65 and not want to stop doing what I'm doing.
Exactly.
So yeah, and honestly, Clens I really believe in, but it's Clens could just be the launching pad to something else.
Yes.
I just want to be known as an artist, and I don't necessarily want to box myself into even just photography. I'm constantly trying to learn different mediums. My writing is something I take a lot of pride in.
I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that you wrote. Okay.
So I want Clens to be a big deal, and I have a lot of faith in it, and I put a lot of time and effort into that aspect of my life, but I'm always thinking of ways to either evolve that or branch out and to make different mediums into different brands or different wearable print
Right.
sort of things. Like a project I wasn't even sure I was going to speak on until I, got it out. But like a project I'm working on right now is I'm taking vintage or thrifted graphic clothing or graphic t-shirts, and I'm printing graphic design work that I've started working on. And like, instead of it being like a photo,
Right.
I'm mixing my own drawings and things like that nature and like calligraphy and mixing them in like what I think is a complementary way with the graphic of the vintage shirt. So the first ones will probably be just, they're experimental, we'll see what happens, but hopefully that starts to evolve. And just kind of putting my hands in all sorts of different buckets, because I think that that's one of the things. I can't remember which artist it was, which prominent artist, but they said we're in a renaissance, like from an artistic or creative perspective, like we are in a renaissance period right now, and that to me is speaking a lot to the fact that like you aren't just a singer, you aren't just an actor, you aren't just a graphic designer, you're not just a photographer or videographer. Like a ton of people are so multifaceted and so good at everything they do that's something to strive for. And I don't think that that's something outside of like people's ability. I mentioned how people and how I respect that people like follow specific artists, right? But the one thing that I like to make a distinction is there's a difference between the artist and the art itself, right? So you can appreciate the art, but not, necessarily be a huge fan of like how that person conducts themselves. And I'm a huge Kanye West fan, but there's a lot of times where, especially with all that Trump stuff coming out, like that was a huge line for me to distinguish, was that I can realize the impact that his work has had on my life, and that still to this day, like, I mean, I'll listen to, College Dropout. I think I was listening to that like last week. Yeah. It's an album that ages well. It's something that I think will probably be timeless, and I can respect that about him and his ability to convey very complex and deep ideas in very concise ways, but also understand that he's still just a person.
Exactly.
He's a human being.
Exactly.
And I think that realization also should inspire people to think like take Childish Gambino, right? Donald Glover, incredibly talented music artist, incredibly talented director, incredibly talented actor. And that instead of thinking like he's just otherworldly, we should look at that and say, why not me? Like, I can learn that. I can teach myself to do that. You may not have right then and there all of the natural talent and the resources. I mean, his dad being a famous music artist, but you may not have all the starting materials that he did, but you can still do that.
Exactly.
You can still be incredibly talented in multiple ways.
Right. But you wouldn't know that unless you go out and try it. And people are so fixated, they're like, or they just don't want to start new things. And that's another thing, like, people are like, it's so inspiring that you do this and, handling that and yada. And I'm like, yeah, I can, so why can't you? Exactly like that. But it's because people limit themselves. And I think it's because they've never done it before, or they're scared that it's not going to come out right the first time. But nothing is ever going to come out right the first time. You just have to be willing to, I'm going to try this out, and whatever happens, happens. That's it.
Exactly. So you exactly. It's like there's a fear of failure, right? Or a fear of like, if I try this and it doesn't work, that was a waste of time.
Right.
But I think another like underlying reason that we have that mentality, again, going back to the capitalist society that we live in, is we have, either from a subconscious or in a lot of ways, very explicit way, we have been told that if this pursuit doesn't reap a monetary return, it's a waste.
Right.
And that's why, like, and that's something that I I hate to admit, but like that was something that I very much had adopted into my psyche when I was growing up and when I was choosing, you know, what to study in school and things like that. Like I very much went into because for a long time I was debating between my areas of study. I was thinking about journalism, political science, graphic design, and then business. And the only reason I was thinking about business was in marketing in particular is because I thought, you know, it's practical. It's something I can get a job at, but there's still some chance of like a creative outlet in the marketing sector. But, you know, had I gone with like what my heart really wanted, I would have probably picked one of those three others. Yeah. And so I think one of the things holding people back, and I think if there's anything to be taken away from this podcast for people listening, is that just because it's not reaping a monetary return doesn't mean it's a waste. Exactly. If it makes you happier, if it gives you any sense of fulfillment, if it clears your head, it's that is something money can't buy. Yeah. And you should definitely do that. I mean, make ends meet. Right. But understand that your life isn't measured by how much you leave it with money-wise. Right.
Because at the end of the day, if you die a billionaire, where's the money going to go? It's going to stay here. You can't take it with you. All you take with you is your experiences. That's it. All
our life is measured by is the impact that we have on other people's lives and other living things' lives on this planet. And so, and I'm a true believer that if you pursue something that intrinsically moves you, you will do that naturally.
Yeah. Yeah, so. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's what Clens is for you, and that's what this podcast is for me. Oh, my bad. All good. I don't get paid for this podcast. Nothing. I mean, it's growing, but I don't care. I don't care that, you know, it's not monetized right now, and I don't care that, you know, people don't understand it right away, because the people that do, like yourself and some of the other artists that I've interviewed, we sit here and we talk and we share our ideas, and then we go out. We're gonna leave this room and we're gonna leave inspired. Like, what's next? What are we gonna do next? And that is like untouchable by money for me. Like, I do not care, like putting time apart to set up interviews and reaching out to people and getting no's or being ignored, whatever. I don't care, because I gain so much from this, and it's just a pastime for now. I'm hoping that one day it would be monetized and, you know, a lot of people listen to it, which is getting there little by little. But if it doesn't, the experience, the people that I meet, like, that's what matters to me. And that's why I'm going to keep doing this. Even when I'm like 50, I hope I keep meeting people and just breaking down like their dream. Why did you do it? You know, what triggered you to do it? And were you like this when you were little? Because these conversations, apart from that, these conversations are had that much. Do you converse like this? Well, obviously, I'm assuming with close friends.
Yeah, I spend a lot of my time isn't spent with people who aren't close friends. Part of that I think is to my detriment. Like, that's how you grow, you know, especially like as a brand and things like that. But you know, I occupy, I think, a really weird part of the market, or at least I visualize it as weird, because the people who I would think, you know, in my mind, like my assumptions or my biases, the people I think who would consume the most of my product are in that sort of hype consumption niche. But I find myself usually having a hard time connecting with a lot of those people, just because the last thing I want to do when I go and hang out with you is like discuss latest drip. Like, yeah. I'm not a big fan of that word. Yeah. But that's all I can, like, whenever I go to like events and things like where that's the crowd for the most part. Like, I went to Complex Con, for example, last year, thinking like, oh, this is going to be cool because I'm going to be in such close proximity to a lot of these prominent artists. Right. And oddly enough, like, I was actually within arm's reach of Jaden Smith. Did not get a chance to say anything to him because I was abruptly a security guard abruptly stepped in front of me. But like that, what I wanted was a way to just at least like say, hey, I appreciate your work,
Right.
kind of thing, to these artists that I like. But really what it turned out to be was just it was a lot of lines that you waded in to then hurriedly spend money on,
Yeah.
in my mind now, especially, just kind of empty status items. So, and I'm a huge Takashi Murakami fan. So like I think it's awesome that he puts that on. He's like the person who basically kind of curates the whole experience. And I definitely bought some of his items from it, but overall I would not go again. So and that's, I think, so that I spend a lot of time with just like my close friends, because these are the things, like, I like to discuss a lot of socioeconomic issues. I wish I like acted more on them, but I don't want to make excuses. So like that's something that I want to make a part of my creative pursuits. Once I have the resources to make actionable sort of influence on either policy or enabling people who are making those those strides, like kind of, or even like opportunities to speak and things like that. So like eventually that's something I want to do, not to make excuses for why I haven't gotten really involved like up to this point. But yeah, I mean, I have these conversations on a fairly regular basis, but you're right, it's not something that's easy to have with like the general populace, and sometimes it's hard, right? Like, because you're on social media, and you're on like Facebook or something like that, and you see like half of the comments are just, I mean, just today I saw like these comments about, I don't know, just these super positive comments about Trump. Or I watched When They See Us on Netflix. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yeah, that was painful to watch.
Oh, awful, right? And the thing is like, then I look it up more, because I mean, those guys were released in '93, which is when I was born. So I had no idea that was a thing up to this point until I saw it on Netflix, which I guess that actually came out in 2013. The show, or
really?
Yeah. So it's on Netflix, which is why it's more common knowledge now and why it's being more talked about now. But actually, so I read an article about it, because you know how Trump was mentioned in the show, right? How he took out like $85,000 worth of ads in New York, calling for the death penalty of these 14 and 15-year-old boys who were coerced into confessing to this awful crime.
Right, that they didn't do.
And he didn't know that at the time, and I can understand somebody's gut, response. And so like, I don't necessarily, this may be an unpopular opinion, I mean, I wouldn't do it myself, but I don't necessarily fault him for his disgust, and he didn't go about it the right way. But I understand to that action, and when we attribute blame to somebody on the public, in that manner, it's easy to create this like idea of these people as these kids as animals and things like that. So I didn't necessarily fault him on his outrage at that time, but what I did fault him, and I fault him for a lot of things, but what I fault, like in this matter specifically, is in 2013 when that came out, he tweeted that he believed that they were still guilty, and basically said that they had conned New York into paying them the $40 or whatever $1 million settlement that they got. And I mean, just even on its face, like they were exonerated not only because of this testimony from the person who actually did it, but also from DNA evidence. And so and he's now the leader of
exactly.
America.
Yeah.
I just remembered reading that, and I couldn't help but think to myself, like, those kids had their youths taken from them, and one of them was going to be in jail for even longer. He was sentenced as an adult because he was 16, and they were able to, because it was such a heinous crime that he was convicted with, and he was there for 14 years, and he was going to serve longer before he got exonerated. And you got to think, like, he went in at 16, he got out 14 years later, he's 30 years old.
Yeah.
there's no amount of money
to replace
that can make that up.
Because that's the time where you grow and you discover like what you want to do.
New York could have bankrupted itself, and it's still, that's not, you I mentioned things earlier that you can't buy with money, and time is the most valuable commodity that there is. So, I mean, think about, and time is another thing that, like, I have a design that's it's around time or centered around time, but like time is another one of those things where I think a lot of us are inspired by, and I find myself thinking about it a lot. But just from the standpoint that, like, I think about how very wealthy people consume, right? And like when you have that level of expendable income, I mean, you buy things like a private jet,
right?
You pay people to manage your appointments for you. There are so many like things that we on the middle or lower classes would consider things that are waste, right? Because you can do that yourself theoretically. Yeah. But what are they doing? They're buying. If you think about it, in a practical sense, they're buying time. They don't care how much that they have to pay you to do this because they have so much money.
Right.
The only thing that is more valuable than their money is time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and it's crazy to me that I don't know, just the vile, like, it just gets me. Like how could you, like, 40 million, I would still be mad.
Exactly.
I would still be like, I would be happy in the sense that, like, I can take care of my family, and
you have your freedom again.
And one of them he's doing this, I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Corey Wise. Mm-hmm. He's doing this really beautiful thing where he created this program based out of I think it's the Colorado's legal school. And they actually go out and they find cases where somebody was falsely convicted, and they represent them in appealing, helping them with their appeals. And so and to think that somebody like that, to see what he's doing with this money that he supposedly conned New York out of, see what he's doing with it, and to think that he's guilty and that he only but
that just goes to show you how deep prejudice goes.
Right.
Like, you can have all the evidence in front of you, everything, DNA, references, paperwork, whatever, and just because of your because prejudice is given to you when you're little, right, or whatever, you grow with that. So imagine losing that. You then question, like, who am I? If these beliefs aren't true, then who am I really? And that's what I think Trump and a lot of other people have in the way, is their prejudice. And you don't want to let go of that because it's part of you. Why would you want to give up that part of you if that's all you know? So then letting go of all that, people then feel like the world has been shaken up under them, because it's like, so all my belief systems, like, what is true then? You know what I mean?
I mean, that's very insightful, right? And
is it right? No,
but you're coming at it from a place of empathy, which is what I think people, like, as much as they don't deserve it, that's where we have to come, because it's not for them, right? It's not like the way we think about, and that's why I brought up, like, I don't necessarily, like, I don't justify it, but I'm not going to demonize him for him taking, like, because I'm just going to assume it was a very emotional response, like taking out those ads in New York. That's from a place of empathy, but and like I said, it's not for them when we come at it and we realize, like, you just literally don't have the capacity to see what's actually going on, and it's such a tricky thing, because it doesn't justify it, but just for ourselves, for our ability in the future to go forward and become better as a human race, as mankind on this earth, like, we have to have that approach to whomever. We still have to realize, like, he should not be president, and he should be 100%. On a societal level, he should be punished for that way of conducting 100%. Himself. But we can't, like, I'm going to try, at least, I'm still human, but I'm going to try not to harbor hatred in myself for this person that they are just flawed.
Yeah.
And forgot where I was going with this, but there was a question. I felt like I was looping back to one of your questions, and then I got lost.
It'd be like that.
Yeah, right. But no, that's what it was. So like that. Sorry, going way back.
Cool.
This is how I just remembered how it all connected. So I think this is why it's so hard for people to have these types of conversations, is because there is so much prejudice.
Yeah.
That so many people, and you're right, like they've built for whatever reason, people make these biases like a part of their self, their identity. And it's so rare, sadly, at least in my experience, it's so rare to come across people who like my identity. One of the things I take most pride in is my ability to take in new information. Like I might have a certain conclusion about somebody or a judgment that I made in my head based on whatever, because a lot of it's subconscious too. But one of the things I pride myself on is if I'm presented with something new, or they act in a way that this model in my head that I had about them doesn't answer, then I realize like my model is wrong. Like I had a conclusion that's not correct, so now I need to modify the way that I'm thinking. And I think for a lot of people it's like a sense of pride, but I think instead of having a sense of pride in like being correct the first time all the time, we should have a sense of pride in having the ability to let go of those beliefs and say, you know what,
maybe I was wrong.
Maybe I was wrong. Like, and be able to apologize. Like apologies shouldn't be a sign of weakness. Apologies should be a sign of like you being able to grow as a person. And accept responsibility for things.
Exactly. Like, okay, I was wrong, and that's okay. And I mean, I always talk about it with my friends. It's an ego thing. It's like, me wrong? I would never be wrong, because then you realize like, oh, so maybe I go about judging things the wrong way. And how do you feel knowing that? To some people, like to me, I understand I make mistakes. I try not to. And when I do, it's okay. Like life is about learning and stuff like that. But to some people, I don't know why that concept is so hard to grasp. I don't know if it's because I don't know. They take pride in that. They're like, yeah, I'm always right. I'm whatever. I don't know. But having the capacity to understand that your opinion can change and what you believe in can change is okay. And if you're wrong, it's okay.
And you said it perfectly. Like, it is an ego thing. So that a lot of one of the things that recently I've gotten a better understanding of is the difference between confidence and ego. So and I just think that was like, I don't know, it's just beautiful what you're saying. Like so confidence, as far as I understand, is, and this is why I take pride in that ability to let go of my conclusions, is that confidence is the belief in oneself to overcome adversity and to overcome changes and to, if you fail, to bounce back. But the ego is a protection of who you are right now. The ego is a stagnant force. It's something that says like, I'm perfect the way that I am, and if somebody says otherwise, then they're the ones who need to change. And so I guess like I think if more people just just forgot about the ego and focused more on being confident in themselves and who they are, like that's another one of those things where it's like a lot of like the like body positivity conversations. The most constructive ones I hear on body positivity is like, if you are striving to have a healthy lifestyle and you are doing things that make you feel good and better and things like that, that's what matters. But like the idea that you need to look this certain way, or that it's okay to be unhealthy, like those aren't, neither of those are constructive. It's your It's your ability to realize that you are on the way, because we're always on the way to something, right? And it's important to enjoy the journey just as much as you are looking forward to the destination. And so that's like when I actually used to be really overweight. Like when I was a kid, I actually was in 8th grade, 5'6" or 5'7", 255 pounds. Huge. I have hand-me-downs for myself to this day.
No.
Yeah, and that was one of the realizations I went through, because like I had all of these. I went through like really sad, like self-loathing periods where I was like, I just want to look a certain way, and it wasn't until I was in the gym for like 6 months to 7 months that I just stopped. Like I was so self-conscious when I first went in there, and like I was like on the treadmill for like 30 minutes at a time, and just looking like crap. I don't know, just like compared to all these athletes at school. And I just remember there was this moment when I was on the treadmill, and oddly enough, or I fitting, I guess, I was listening to Last Call by Kanye West. I was listening to his monologue at the end, and he has this part where he's talking about how he went to all these ARs, and he was talking to all these people to try to get into the industry as a rapper as well as a producer, because everyone was buying his beats at this time, but nobody wanted to help him to release his own album or get him out there, right, as his own artist. And he just talks about how I think it's also in the song itself. He says I could let these dream killers kill my self-esteem, or he says arrogance, but it's more confidence, right? Or use my arrogance as a steam to power my dreams. And that was one of those moments when I was on the treadmill, and I was like, you know what?
Yes.
Like I don't really care what people see when they look at me. Like I feel better. I'm getting where I'm going, and eventually, I'm enjoying this period, and eventually it'll get me to where I'll also just enjoy being. And so no, I think if people focus more on the confidence side of things, and like really investing in themselves and their ability to pick up new information, because that's the other part, is like if you're able to let go of your conclusions and your biases based on new stimulus and new information, right. The other thing you're opening yourself up to is being able to learn better.
Yes.
If you go into an art form thinking that this is how it's done, you're never going to be the next whomever. Yeah. Like you're not, because you're just copying in your mind this template that's already been done. You can learn from those, and you can learn from other styles too,
right. And pick and choose.
But that's how you create your own. Exactly. And that's how you evolve as an artist.
Exactly.
So like I just think it's all interrelated. The way that we look at ourselves, the way that we look at society, the way that we consume, it all is a part of both our identity and our societal culture. So
were you ever in your own way of releasing your creative outlet?
Very much so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What were the conversations in your head? No one's going to wear this. What are they going to think? Like, what was going through your head?
The opposite. I was too concerned about making sure it was something that people would buy. So I'll tell any person who goes into what I'm doing or anything similar, like clothing especially, or art, right? I got one thing I did to myself was I tried to create a design that I thought would be have like a mass appeal, which I'm still proud of those designs. I'm not trying to down at all the things that I released, because they were still things that I liked, but they weren't designs that I was like stoked about personally, right? Like I was ready to, like I wanted to wear it every day. Now with the stuff, especially the stuff that I love my premium work, and I think they're beautiful, but more so just because it's my style. Like I wear the thrifted, the repurposed all the time. I'm wearing one right now.
Yeah.
And that's the, like, there was a kind of a tipping point, I think about a year into creating this that I just realized, because it was slow, right? It was slow at the beginning. It took me 10 months to sell my first 50 shirts.
Whoa.
Yeah, a long time.
10 months?
10 months.
Holy
to sell
shit.
50.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. That's like, no, that's
Yeah.
so... Oh.
And people think if you have like
Overnight.
a cool design,
Yeah.
and I mean, I think I print on like my premium stuff, and that's all I had at the beginning. I didn't have the repurposed wearable prints, and I mean, I'm not trying to be, ego driven when I say this, but like most people who are starting a clothing brand right now, they don't have the same quality blanks that I do. I have, that was something I meticulously sourced and paid close attention to. Like, that was something that took me 2 months to figure out and paid a decent amount of money to figure out before I ever even got those blanks. I didn't go to a printer and say, I'm just going to use Hanes Beefy tees, and it's all custom. I did all the measuring to make sure that the grading was complementary in a way that I thought was cool. I mean, I went to malls and like had like a tape measure, like a ruler, and just like looked at shirts I thought fit well and like took measurements and looked stupid, but like that's what it took. So but the thing that I would stress more than anything, if you're going into any sort of creative outlet, is one, again, don't look for a return right away. That was my problem. I should have just put out small releases of things that I liked a lot, like that I just personally moved me, and let those releases and those styles evolve me to, probably to where I am now, but like just like, much faster.
Right.
And also just realizing that by doing that, you may have a lot that don't sell. You may you may end up hating some of them, in fact, but like, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to create a culture around yourself, and you're going to meet the right people.
Exactly.
That's the that you mentioned that earlier when you were talking about this podcast, and like how you just love that more than anything, you do what moves you, and the people that you need to be around you will find you.
Oh yeah, 100%.
My girlfriend, we've been dating a year, and before her, I really hadn't had a relationship that I was like super invested in for like 6 years. And I was ready to just be like, you know what, screw it, like, nose down, and I'm just gonna forget about that whole aspect and just do my job and run my brand, and
whatever happens.
Yeah, and literally it was funny because it was my first time setting up at First Friday, and like I said, this was like I was probably 2 weeks into this thought process of like, I'm not gonna like pursue anybody, and it is what it is. And she was my neighbor. It was her first time doing First Friday.
Wow.
And so because I was pursuing Clens, something that my parents are very much supportive, but they still are like somewhat conventional in their way of thinking.
Yes.
Like they, sometimes they think that I spend a bit too much time on it, or they don't really like quite get why I'm so committed to making it work. But I give them credit though, because they've come a long way. Like I hate to admit that it's part of it is because it's grown to a certain extent, but my parents have come a long way in how they think about it, and they were never like unsupportive. They always were like, it's a cool idea, pursue it, but also
have a plan B,
have a job and get
get
going on a career. So but it's like she's just a really great example of how, because I was doing something that I loved and I wanted to do, that I found somebody else that I really connect with. And I've met a lot of people that way. Like I met you doing First Friday.
And literally so, it was about to end. First Friday was done, and we just walked up and we're like, hey, let's buy a shirt.
Right. And I mean, and that's the other reason why I consider everyone who's bought Clens Wearable Prints, like they're patrons. You're not a customer to me. It's personal. You're supporting me being able to put more of it out. Yeah. And Clens is one of those things where, like, even if that's not the brand that ends up being the one that really takes off. Let's say, like, I'm not a huge fan of his brands per se, but I'm a huge fan of the person, right? This is one of those weird distinctions, but like Virgil Abloh, right? Pyrex, who nobody talks about that now. No. What was he doing? He was printing Pyrex on 23 on the back of, rugby flannels and then selling it for a ridiculous markup. And now, that's not the one that took him to a mainstream level, but that set the foundation, right? That was like one of his first bigger forays into streetwear. He was an architecture major, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And he was part of Kanye's posse, which a lot of people know. But yeah, that was his first like foray, and it did well. But it didn't get him the recognition, even close to the recognition that he has now. Right. So you just never know, and that's part of also, linking back everything. Like that's another part of that confidence thing, another part of that openness to change and evolve is this understanding that I'm doing this now, but what I'm really doing is I'm developing a culture around myself. Exactly. And eventually it could be this, but it could be off-white, or it could then be off-white in conjunction with being creative director of Louis Vuitton. And now, a lot of these people who now know who Virgil Abloh is, a lot of them don't even know what Pyrex is. Yeah. So Clens could be like that. Clens could be, but I want it to be what it, I want it to get to that next level or next however many levels, 100 levels on from here. Right. But I go into it with the understanding that I'm just creating art and I'm taking it and I'm going wherever art takes me.
Yes. And that's important because whatever first project people launch, you need to understand that if it fails, now you're prepared on what not to do for your next project. Just because one thing fails does not mean that, okay, I'm done forever. No, now you have all I look at it like I have a toolbox, okay? And because I have this podcast and because you have Clens and because you have your music stuff, like, you are putting into your toolbox. And if it fails, now you have these experiences and the people and whatever else that you got to put in here to apply to a new project so that you set it even smoother in motion. Like, that's what I want people to understand as well. Like, it's okay to fail. It's okay. Just that as long as you learn from, okay, I failed because of this and this and this and this and that. Now I can flip the switch and do it right this time in whatever other niche it is. Let's say, okay, I'm doing audio now. Maybe I'll end up doing video, or I don't know. I'm just open, like you said, open to wherever it's headed.
No, exactly. And the other part of that too is like, I mentioned putting things out. Everything's a balance. So, and I mentioned putting things out that you really like and that moves you. But of course, the other part of that too is that you want to be open to other people's feedback. Don't take it as a personal attack if somebody disagrees with you. And that doesn't mean, like I said, it's a balance. Like, I don't like focus on the marketability like I did. Like, is this going to sell well kind of mentality, especially at the beginning. But understanding that your personal growth and your artistic taste can be positively impacted by other people's perspective. If they look at your work and they say this or this, I like this or this or this, but I don't like this, and this, and understanding that, and then asking them maybe like, what's an example of a piece of art that you like, and then now all of a sudden you have a broader perspective. Exactly. To take your own work. You can still make it yours, but just understanding that that's a part of the iterative process. Like, that's how you improve. Right.
It's a new conversation, and then also knowing that not everything you do is for everybody, and that's okay.
Exactly. And the other thing I would recommend, one of the most valuable things that I took away, and that I would, I would tell any artist who is going into a business on their own, is learn about just because it's gonna come in handy so much when you actually do start to try to make money on it, is that you should really understand the concepts of fixed costs, variable costs, revenue streams, and then your break-even point. And it's very easy algebra. That's why I think business school is so funny, because it doesn't take 4 years to understand how to run a business. And if you don't have like an entrepreneurial mindset, that's not necessarily something you can learn in school.
Right.
So that's just something you kind of have to learn out on your own. And the other resource I would highly recommend anyone trying to go into business for themselves is familiarize yourself with what's called the business model canvas. That is one of the by far most valuable takeaways I had from my education, and it's a super easy thing to learn. It's literally like it's a canvas. It's split into different sections, and it just helps you to conceptualize your business model. So having that basis understanding, and I wish we, in an ideal world, we wouldn't be, forced to think in these ways. But I mean, we live in a resource constrained world. Like, that's just naturally how it is. And I'm not saying that capitalism is the best system, but it's a system that's derived from the fact that we are resource constrained in general, as inhabitants on Earth. So understanding these concepts of how to take what you have and build it are just very important, even if they aren't your initial focus or your main focus, which they shouldn't. But like you still, it's still valuable to know.
Can I tell you an observation I just made?
Yeah.
You're very analytical and creative at the same time. You're like a hybrid. You're literally, because you're talking about books and like this algebra and how you went to business school, and then you are such a creative being, and it's like, I feel like it's like perfect. You're like a hybrid, literally, and you're using it to your advantage. You must know that about yourself, right?
I mean, I do. Yeah. I appreciate that, that feedback. I will say that I hate math. I understand math, but I hate doing it.
Right.
Like, that's one of those things where, if and when I become wealthy, like, that's one of the places I'm going to invest in saving time the most, right? Is like somebody's going to run my books for me.
Exactly.
But no, I appreciate that. Like, I like being able to, and I don't know if it's innate, because I like to think that it's something that everybody has the ability to do. But I've always, and maybe it's just a part of my upbringing too, my parents have always stressed the ability, or like the importance of being well-rounded. And I'm also just the type of person who doesn't, to the best of my ability, I don't like, and even to a fault in some cases, I don't like to ask for help.
Yeah.
And so
same.
Yeah. So like if I can, metaphorically speaking, put that hat on, put that different hat on, and wear it for a little bit to get by, then that's what I want to do.
Right.
So I appreciate that. And I think that's also like, that comes through, I think that comes through in my artwork too, right? Like, I can't help but, in a lot of my writing, I can't help but write in an almost academic way. And I also just want to speak really quickly on the idea of like proper enunciation in speech being a race thing. I think that's so wrong. I hate that, and it goes both ways. I hate that, like, because I speak in a certain way, that makes me like more white than other people. And I also hate that, just because like I have a black friend who speaks very well, that somehow makes him more indoctrinated into white community. When I was growing up I'm from Nebraska originally. I don't know if you guys know that, but that's where I'm from originally. And I grew up in Omaha, and I had a friend who, he lived in the poorer neighborhoods, and like he and I were friends from the age of 2. He's still one of my best friend, is my best friend to this day. And he grew up in North Omaha, which is primarily black and low income, and that's where I spent 80% of my social life in high school. And but you'd never know that.
No.
And so that's why I think it rubs me so wrong, is like, just because I like to make sure that my language that I use is accurate and as expressive as possible in the least amount of words. Somehow that detracts from my ability to like belong in this different group of people, because the way I talk doesn't matter. The way that I connect with you is what matters.
Right,
so.
because and it's partly prejudice again, and because you don't look, you're all different. You know, it's two different extremes, but it's like, what does that matter? It shouldn't matter. Yeah.
And I mean, that's a digression, and like there's definitely as a white male, I want to make it very clear that I don't face discrimination in this country. There are people who face real discrimination every day, and I think it's terrible that, you know, a lot of the white conservative population tries to make it out like they're the victims here, when the country is literally built off of them, but or off of their interests, I should say. Not built off of them.
The base,
so anyway,
where do you want, at the end of the day, a year from now or whatever, where do you want Clens to go, and what do you want people to take away from our conversation that we just had?
So, okay, great questions. So Clens, and just like my art in general, right? At the end of the day, I would be extremely happy with my life if I just had a comfortable living doing it. I don't need to be independently wealthy. I mean, that'd be great. That would be. I mean, I
wouldn't complain.
Right. And I also would, if I was, you know, at that level, I would very much be using my resources and my influence to better other people's lives. That's the goal to me.
Yes.
Like, once I have my needs met and I'm able to, you know, travel and see the world and get paid to make art doing so, like the next bit of income that goes towards making it more possible for other people to find fulfillment in their lives, and to maybe bring people out of, like, I mean, do something like what Corey Wise did, right? Like there is no amount of money that will make you ever feel better about your life than if you get somebody in a dark place into a better one. I mean, like, and we're social beings. That's why we have society, right? I mean, on Earth, we are the most social creature, and that's why we have the concept of a shared memory, right? Because we all write things down, we record it, and that's how we as a whole, mankind as a race, we build off of that prior knowledge. There's no other organism on Earth that does that. And so when you realize that and you think about the psychology and the biological aspects behind that, the most enjoyable thing, because it's crazy to think about this, right? When you help somebody, you're helping yourself. It's very much like, even though it seems selfless, it's actually selfish, because you're deriving enjoyment out of that. You wouldn't do it if you didn't, and it's because we're wired for that.
Exactly. Like
you could get the biggest paycheck of your life tomorrow, and unless your brain or your chemistry is an anomaly, like it's just wired different from the general population, which Wall Street is toxic for that reason. Like, those people are just awful people, and I'm trying to come at it from a sense of empathy, or from a place of empathy, but you know, but because it's not their fault that they're wired that way, but they don't think about the impact that they're making on average people. But when you're talking about middle class, lower class Americans, even upper middle and lower middle, you know, and I shouldn't even take away from some of the upper. Sometimes we forget there is much variance in the top 1%, in the top 0.1%, as there is in the entire economic, socioeconomic system. So you think about that. There is as much of a gap between the 1% and the top 10% of them as there is in the entire. So those people, you know, when we're talking about the 1%, we're not really talking about, you know, the people who are making, you know, 100K or have $1 million in assets, because $1 million in assets is still, I mean, if you think about everything, you're comfortable, but like, you don't really have the means to impact change.
Exactly.
And so I think that there's a lot of times there's this disconnect in the understanding that those people are probably just normal people too, if they just had the ability to speak freely with the middle class. There's all this striation of people. We're all siloed, and but again, the biggest thing is the realization that if in your lifetime you have the ability to help others, that you will leave this life so much happier. You will lead your life so much happier than anybody who's making more money than you and not doing that.
Exactly.
So I guess that would be the biggest takeaway. And for those listening, and also if you want to check out the Instagram.
All your information. I mean, I'm going to include all your links and everything just so people can find you, because you have a goal in mind, and your platform to grow, it needs to happen. Like, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. And the more people we can get on it, the better for everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the other one that people might be interested in as well, just because it's more of a personal Instagram. I post a lot of my film photos, and I'm much less consistent on there. So like if you're looking for a lot of content, don't go there. Okay. But when I post on there, that's where a lot of my written work goes, or like because I'll usually post a photo and then write something underneath it that is inspired by that image. So if you're looking for a more personal touch or something that's more thought provoking, I guess that would it's at Lone Lone Sonderer, Sonderer.
Okay.
But yeah, both of those, I greatly appreciate anybody who comes and checks it out, regardless of whether you make a purchase or not.
Right. They will.
And I mean, this has just been such a great experience.
This was beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I'm so happy that we got to do it. And like I said, we need more people like you, your voice, your story out there, so you can inspire people. Like, just you talking now, it just gave me ideas. Like, okay, what do I have to go home and do now? Like,
I love that.
How creative can I get now? Yeah, because like you said, why not?
Right.
What's the difference between you and I? Just time. I mean, time and effort. Like, how much am I trying to invest in this?
Yeah, exactly. We are an adaptive species.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have the brain power to read and write and pick up new information, you have all the tools you need to succeed at anything you want to.
There's no excuses.
None.
Just that you not getting up.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's just, you can do it. And I know that's such a cliche, but it's so true. Like it's things are cliche typically because they are true.
Exactly.
So, just get up and it doesn't. And sorry, one last thing. One last thing. Just because I think that this is we have such an issue with, like, I would call it an epidemic of anxiety in our generation.
Yes.
And I think a lot of it also derives from the idea that if I wake up and I do something, I have to do it for X amount of time, or I have to, like we were talking about earlier, like I have to achieve this thing. Like, for example, if I wake up and I decide I want to meditate to clear my head, there's somewhere, in your mind that it's a waste of time if you don't do it for 15 minutes.
Yes.
Like, don't get caught up with that. Like, just do it. Like, even if you only get 2 minutes in and then you lose it, then you know what? You did it for 2 minutes. That was better than not doing it at all.
Or just sit on the mat. Like, the intention is what matters.
Yeah. And then going, because eventually you'll get there.
Yeah.
You'll get into the groove. Like when I was hitting the gym for the first time, I was only going in there for like 20-30 minutes and then just like out of breath or just like just like defeated or deflated feeling, just looking at myself in the mirror. But it was the fact that I went in there every day or every other day, and I just kept telling myself, like, you're just gonna force through it a little bit at each time. And then before I knew it, when I was in college, I was working out 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. I'm nowhere near. I need to get back in the gym now. Like, not boasting anything now, but like back then, it was like one of the only things keeping me sane when I was going through school. But like you'd be surprised how over time, just chipping away at that initial hesitation or that apprehension will get you. And like, even if it's just like, if you want to learn a new skill, let's say, just because I'm a photographer, like if, let's say you want to learn photography, just pick up a camera. You're not gonna, like, who cares if you're literally who cares if you don't take a good picture that day? Just go out, walk around, get some fresh air, and shoot whatever, you know, you think looks all right. Figure out the settings. Or just read for a little bit. Read till you fall asleep, you know, about a skill or a different mindset or whatever it is that you want to pick up. And like I said, you will be so surprised how from that first day you may have only read 5 minutes about it to a year from now you're the expert in your peer group of like how that works. You know, I never thought when I picked up photography, I literally just screwed around on the settings of a DSLR. That was the other thing, is like, just throw yourself into it. I just went into manual. I didn't shoot auto. I just threw it into manual. I knew nothing about the settings at all. I just like clicked around and moved the dial until like I took a picture that was some semblance of what I had in my head as to what it should look like. And then it was only like a month later that I really started to read, you know, the manual, or read like the foundational concepts in online. But I still had fun just figuring it out and failing along the way.
That struggle is important because it shows you. It's literally like testing you, like, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want it? And it gets harder, and then out of nowhere one day you're just like, oh my god, this is so easy.
It sure as hell beats spending an hour scrolling on Instagram and feeling bad about yourself. Like, it's worlds better than that. And I say that as a person who creates content on Instagram. Just do yourself a favor and don't worry about what's going on. And don't get caught up in FOMO. The only thing that you could possibly be missing out on is your own life. So
that's so beautiful. Thank you, Cole.
Thank you.
You're amazing. And I'm excited to see you grow and to see where you're gonna go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm looking forward to hanging out more.
Of course, of course. Yeah. So I will put all your information everywhere, and I'm excited to. We will have to do this again. We will do this again.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, guys.
That was so beautiful. Oh my god, I know. My mind just like gave up during the middle of that conversation.